Cool. Well, Matt, thank you for being here. Ania, we really appreciate you being here as well. Before we get started, I just want to make sure everybody is prepared and has everything they need. We're going to make a tea punch. So you should have a rocks glass. You should have a agricole rum of some sort. You should have a cane syrup or a sugar syrup of some kind. A lime that is preferably cleaned because you're going to put the actual skin of that in your drink. A jigger and a swizzle stick of some sort. So hopefully you're all prepared and you have all these items because we're going to get rolling here. Yeah. So Ania, do you want to? I was
going to say, hey Mike, I have a very, very quick question. Where did you get your Rhum JM? Because I used to have that in California, but I haven't been able to find it here.
Specs. I think it's like $10 at Specs.
Yeah, cool. At least I know it's at Specs because I couldn't see it at the shaker. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, shaker usually carries it. Sometimes they just need to order out, but it's readily available.
Awesome.
Well, Ania, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what you're doing here.
Well, this is my first Austin Rum Society meeting. Happy to see everybody. Happy to know that we have a Austin Rum Society now, so that's exciting. My name is Ania, last name is Robbins. I am the market manager for Texas, mostly, but also Louisiana and New Mexico, and I think 5 other states. But I'm a rum lover beyond all, and I used to stand behind the bar here in Austin and met our North American director at some point, and he was very surprised that in a tiny bar like Drinkwell, I had 5 or 10 bottles of agricole behind the bar. So we got to talking, and eventually I got to go to Martinique and found myself in this job 5 years ago. So yeah, that's in short. But Mike reached out a couple weeks ago and said he would like to talk about tea punch and of course agricole. So here I am.
Thank you so much. So let's get started. You want to just go ahead and make it, and then we'll talk kind of about the history and how it's drank in the islands?
Sure. So tea punch is a traditional rum drink of Martinique. As all rum drinks, it's a holy trinity, holy combination of 3 ingredients, and it's rum, lime, and sugar. But depending where you are, which islands you add, it would be prepared in a different ways. So Martinique preparation is essentially mostly rum, and then a little bit of sugar and a little bit of lime. When I was a bartender, I used to nerd out on the balance between the 3 ingredients. And one of those simple drinks that's actually very easy to mess up. So it's all about the balance, right? On Martinique, when you order tea punch, they often say prepare your own death and put all 3 ingredients in front of you. You kind of assemble your own death to your liking. So some people like it tartar, some people like it more sweet. So it depends on your taste. But when I taught my bartenders to make a tea punch, I always said the only variable you will have in this drink is the lime, right? Sometimes they're drier, depending on the season. Sometimes they're juicier, so on and so forth. So I say always taste your tea punch right after you made it, and then adjust it to your liking. So I take a lime, and I like to roll it around to release all the juices. And then I would cut a $1-sized coin off the side. So you will get a little bit of pulp and a little bit of juice, as well as the skin, which will bring a little bit of bitterness to the drink and make it a little bit more complex. So, and you squeeze it in your glass. Are you guys making it with me? I can't see. Yep. So if you want, not necessarily, but I like a little bit more bitterness in my tea punches, so I give it a good squeeze. If you have a muddler, you can use a muddler. And then my favorite spec to start with is 2 ounces of rum. I'm going to use 110 since we're in a high proof call here. And a bar spoon of syrup. If you don't have raw cane syrup, I'd say use Demerara. It's rich and viscous. And I'll just do a bar spoon.
Ania, would you say, what's the equivalent of a bar spoon? Is that about a 1/4 ounce or is it less than that?
It's a little bit, it's a little under 1/4 ounce. So, but it's best to start with small amount and then add more. You can always add more. That's the principle I go by. You can I'll always add more sugar.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is a bar spoon is traditionally around 1/6 of an ounce. So, which you know, unless you have the exact little measuring cup, it's hard to tell the difference.
Yeah, and also you can always eyeball your tea punch. There is nothing wrong with that. Remember, it's a drink that's available to everybody on the island, and it's just a traditional way to drink it, to drink your rum. So people don't usually nerd out on the tea punch like us, but we're nerds, so we're gonna nerd out. And then you can swizzle with sizzle stick, or you can swizzle with spoon to aerate your tea punch. And it's very fitting that my ice maker has broken, so I'm taking my tea punch the traditional way without ice. But you guys feel free to add ice to it.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I actually don't have a bottle of agricole here, but I have like a true agricole. I have a St. George, California agricole, and I have like the 100% cane juice Charanda.
Oh, do Charanda. I'm, to be honest, I'm not a fan of the St. George agricole. I don't think they make it anymore.
They don't.
It's a little bit too far on the savory side of the spectrum for me. I like the natural sweetness of the cane that comes through with agricole. So mine actually turned out perfect from the first try.
Yeah, this is remarkable. This is the first one I've made with the organic Nissan, the 52.5.
Yeah, that one is delicious.
Yeah, this is I could drink this all day, every day. I mean, this is just perfection. So simple, but so delicious.
The way I describe tea punch to people is a daiquiri had a baby with an old fashioned.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the prepare your own death thing in Martinique is you would almost never see this here in a bar in the United States where they just hand you the rum and like whatever amount you want in there. But it's interesting because it's so inexpensive there that you're not gonna really cost them a whole lot of money, and B, if you do pour yourself a giant glass, you're gonna be one and done. So it's not really a big deal.
Nope. How's everybody's tea punch?
Yeah, let's see what rums you guys all used.
I did VSOP, and it is pretty solid.
Oh, so Ania, so I mean, this is typically made with an overproof, unaged agricole, typically,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
So
that's what locals love drinking. Aged rum really gained popularity overseas outside of Martinique, but now they develop an appreciation for aged rum as well. But I partial to unaged agricole. That's what kind of changed my mind about rum a long time ago. So I love unaged agricole.
Well, I've got a cheap bottle of Dylan right here that I'm going to use for my second because one drink never lasts the whole meeting. So I'm going to compare the two.
Cool. So we're going to start a little presentation I put together. We have Ania and Matt who can chime in, kind of like Matt did on the Navy one, where if there's any corrections or additions, I'll send it their way to make sure we get accurate information out there. This one's not going to be nearly as dense as that last one. Probably lasts about 15, 20 minutes. So yeah, if everyone could just stay on mute so we don't have interruptions. If you have questions, put them in the chat or save them for after. Once we get through the presentation, we'll do the tasting of the rums. Hopefully everybody got samples from me or has other options at their disposal from their home bars. And I know some of you got the Grand Rhum from Le Galion. So that'll be an extra little treat that we'll throw on to the end because that's the molasses-based Martinique rum. Oh yeah, one more question about tea punch, Ania. Was this just a traditional drink of Martinique, or did the other French islands also serve this? And what would the differences be in production of it, or how they made it? Is Ania still here? Okay, maybe she stepped away. Well, we'll save that question for later. All right.
Okay,
So,
this is, I should know that not to do this, but I was on mute and talking, so sorry for that. Like, you would think after a year and a half I will stop doing it. So no, it's not exclusive to Martinique. Of course, other French islands drink tea punch, but I think it gained popularity through Martinique because Martinique has AOC designation, so rhum agricole designation. And that is a traditional way to drink rhum agricole. So, but yeah, of course, they drink it on Marie-Galante and Guadeloupe and other French islands.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So I am going to share my screen and start the presentation. You all see this?
Yep.
Now I told you to mute yourselves.
We can see it. I can.
Okay, cool. All right, so this is our third installment of Taste the Plates. We're going to concentrate on the French West Indies, particularly the islands of Martinique, Guadeloupe, and Marie-Galante. If you look on the map here, which I have a thing in the way of it, Guadeloupe is the kind of butterfly-looking island, and then the little itty-bitty one next to it is Marie-Galante, and then Martinique is down here. So it's situated just a little bit north of St. Lucia and Barbados. So we're going to go over just a little bit of history. We're going to talk about rhum agricole, how it came to be, and rhum industriel, which I'm probably saying improperly. I'm going to pronounce a lot of things wrong tonight because I don't know French at all. We're going to get into AOCs and GIs, and that's, I know, area of expertise for Matt in particular, probably Ania as well. So yeah, let's get into it.
Hey, real quick, Mike, one thing, the one thing you're missing from the French West Indies is French Guyana.
Ah.
It's just to the south of Guyana, but it's also part of the French West Indies and has its own GI as well.
And there's still French Guyana, like to this day?
There is still French Guyana to this day.
So what is there any, how much rum production comes out of there?
I'm drawing a blank on the rum name. Ania might know.
Yes.
But yeah, there is. From all my research of all the GIs, they're like, oh yes, there's French Guyana as well. So
cool. And then I guess, I mean, is like Mauritius and that area, are those French owned as well?
They're French overseas territories, and they also have a GI, if I remember correctly. Okay.
So we're just going to focus on 3 islands tonight. We'll expand in the future. All right. So hopefully everyone here is familiar with agricole rum, or at least and have tried it and know that it's made from sugarcane juice rather than molasses. It gets a lot deeper than that, but you should at least know that much. But yeah, the French territories, hundreds of years ago, they made their rum in a traditional way from molasses in pot stills. It wasn't until much later that agricole came to be. Raw sugar was a major source of commerce and revenue for the French islands. Nearly half the landmass of Martinique is cane. So they use that to make crystallized sugar, which hundreds of years ago was it was a luxury item for those back in France and on the mainland where cane didn't grow. Rum was just kind of the happy residual product from sugarcane waste. So eventually an influx of this inexpensive rum made its way to France in the early 18th century to protect the brandy market from collapsing. Imports of rum were banned, which led to an excess of unusable molasses on the French islands. So if they're not making rum with it, it was pretty much worthless. So they started offering their molasses cheaply to New England distilleries. They were underselling the molasses prices that the British were offering, which eventually led to the Molasses Act. And that's a topic we can get much deeper into in another Pizza Plates.
Hey, Mike. Really quick, I'll just add a little more sort of historical context that Marco Pierini recently wrote about, and I will be writing about at some point, is when you're talking about export of rum to France banned in 1713. Basically, for that was around 100 years or so that basically the French islands weren't shipping their rum to France and Europe. And it was around the same time that the Spanish islands, the Spanish territories, were also basically banned from shipping their things back to Europe as well. So if you think about the Caribbean as being French, Spanish, and English, basically the French and the Spanish territories had their hands tied, hands behind their backs for about 100 years during the 1700s. And that's why, in some ways, why the English, Jamaica, Trinidad, Jamaica, Guyana, all those British islands, Barbados, sort of like gained dominance, were the biggest producers until around 1800 when things started to shift. So,
okay, cool, good insight. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
So yeah, with the ban of the exports, it hindered their rum production, but the raw sugar was still a major source of revenue. Up until the point where Matt said things were changing. I've heard multiple theories on this, but from my understanding, when France was at war with Britain, there was a shipping blockade that made it difficult for them to export the crystallized sugar from the French West Indies to the homeland. So that's when Napoleon started pushing for the harvest of sugar beets in France to satiate the demand for sweets back there. So they no longer needed the sugar from the French islands. So not only did they have difficulty selling the waste product, now they had difficulty selling the actual product they were making from their cane.
Yeah.
So that forced a lot of estates and distilleries to close. Others just simply started fermenting the raw cane juice and making rum from that. So just quickly on how crystallized sugar is made. You crush the cane, you get a juice from that, you boil it, and it crystallizes, and then you extract the molasses from it. So it's a laborious task, and they were just cutting out that process, just crushing the cane and fermenting that juice and distilling it. And that's how we came to have agricole rum. And St. James is said to be the first registered brand of agricole rum in 1882. It's very possible that other companies were making an agricole rum before that. But I guess St. James has the registered mark on it. Does that sound pretty accurate to you, Matt?
Yeah, it's generally true as far as I know. I mean, the thing about the Caribbean is now we think about rum being made from molasses or being made from cane juice. If you go back far enough, it was, hey, whatever they happen to have on hand, whatever if they can sell the molasses, they'll sell the molasses. It was common for rum to be a mixture of molasses and cane juice, maybe spoiled cane juice. There's this idea that there was this big bang switch from molasses to cane juice. In reality, it was a much longer, drawn out process. And there were certainly some cane juice only rums being made earlier, but the question is, were they the dominant product? Were they something that had a specific market for it? So it's sort of like a gray transition rather than sort of a big bang moment. So
right, and certainly like in Brazil, they were making sugarcane juice distillate since what, the 1600s or so. So this wasn't like a new phenomenon.
Yeah. I mean, even the stuff coming out of Brazil, by all of our understanding, was molasses as well. It was the sugar had the high value. Sugar was like what the primary focus was, and if you couldn't sell the sugar, then they found some other use for the sugar cane juice or the byproducts or whatever.
All right, so let's get into what rum agricole is. You know, it's bare simplest. It's a style originating in the French Islands, made from fresh pressed sugarcane juice instead of molasses. It's unknown exactly when production on the islands began. Claims are between the 1850s and 1880s. But like Matt said, it wasn't a dominant style for probably another 100 years or so as it gained traction. In 1996, an AOC was ratified. It was a very lengthy document that outlined strict production regulations that define the category of rum agricole as a distinct product of France. Guadeloupe and Marie-Galante have similar guidelines in their GIs that share the core values of the AOC. The importance of an AOC and a GI cannot be understated. You know, if you look at the world of whiskey, you have all your subcategories. You have your Scotch, your rye, your bourbon, your Japanese, Canadian, etc. All these, you know, that they're based on a distinct region, production methods. They all have, you know, rules and guidelines that are abided by, and everyone accepts. You know, you can make whiskey from you know, from malted barley in America, but you can't call it Scotch. You can make what would be bourbon in America in Scotland or Ireland, and you can't call it bourbon because it has to be from America. So there's a certain value and protection that all these categories have that rum doesn't have, because rum is kind of just a blanket term. But you know, you have subcategories below that, rum agricole being one, and it's recognized in the EU. You know, and that protects you know, the tradition, the style. It has a very distinct flavor. It adds value, like I said, like Scotch is highly revered because of the methods and the way it's made. So yeah, the problem is in the US, you have things like Kim was pointing out.
Can you go back just a tiny bit? I just add a tiny little comment there. One thing is that it's interesting. It's not rum agricole is sort of protected by the EU, but the term, the actual AOC or the GI protections are not specifically for rum agricole. It's specifically for rum agricole of Martinique or rum agricole of Guadeloupe. And it's interesting, if you look at the Guadeloupe GI, it allows different things that the Martinique one doesn't, in particular column distillation. So Martinique rum agricole must be column distilled, whereas Guadeloupe rum agricole allows some additional types of distillation, not column distillation. And so it's like when you get into these little subtle details, they're actually important differences we have to know. And we'll sort of add on to that. You know, when we think of rum agricole today, we think cane juice, column distilled. But it's an interesting question: when did Martinique? You know, it's not just when did Martinique first distill from cane juice, but also when did they distill cane juice from in a column still? And that's actually something I've studied quite intensely. Is when did column still make its way to the Caribbean and sort of influence styles? And I've uncovered quite a bit of interesting stuff, which we'll go into here. But there's a little bit of history will be rewritten at some point. So anyhow. You know, the agricole, you know, the agricole we think of today, Martinique rum agricole, cane juice, column distilled within very specific distillation parameters and congener levels, for example. So anyhow, I'll shut up now. Keep going.
No, we welcome all this. You know, we're here to learn. And, you know, I did the bare minimum of research for this. And I don't want to, for one, put false information out there. So we really appreciate you adding on and clarifying.
No, it's my pleasure. I love it.
So yeah, that brings me to American or non-French island agricoles. So yeah, there aren't, as far as I know, there aren't protections in the U.S. Against using the term agricole. So you have, you know, Kohana from Hawaii, St. George from California, and the cane land from Louisiana, which I don't think is around anymore. And I think St. George isn't around anymore. And, you know, these can all be very delicious rums. There's nothing saying that they're not. It's just, you know, using the term agricole, or even, you know, the one in Louisiana calling themselves rum agricole with an H, with the spelling of it. And, you know, maybe they're made from sugarcane juice, but that's where it kind of ends. You know, they don't abide by the strict regulations in the AOC or in the GIs of the French islands.
Yeah, I mean, in general, something like a GI or a name, a protected name, is really only as good as to begin with the country that defined it. And so in general, it's only applicable there unless you can get other countries or other trading blocs to recognize it. So in the case of agricole, for example, the European Union, you know, France is part of the European Union. European Union recognizes rum agricole as in agricole, and actually agricultural in English, and I forget the Spanish version, but they basically recognize that it's not just agricole, but actually the agricultural term, the different languages, they recognize that in all the major languages. And so, you know, within the EU country is protected, but if you're not an EU country, it's game open. It's not just the US, it's a matter of if you're not an EU, it's not protected.
Right, and you know, it's a disservice to the category, because you know, like I've had St. George, I've had Kohana, I've not had the other one. There's plenty more beyond this that they use the terminology agricole, and you know, if somebody that's their first venture into the category, you know, like there's so many factors that we're about to get into, including like terroir, that define the flavor and the characteristic of a rum agricole from the French islands. So it's, you know, in the US, when there's all these other products calling themselves agricole, it doesn't help the category as a whole, because you know, it's like putting Scotch on an American whiskey. It's not correct.
True, but to that point, those products cannot then be sold in the EU as well.
Right.
And they would need to have a different labeling on them at a minimum.
Right. Yep. All right. So this is a very abridged version of some of the regulations. Definitely go to cocktailwonk.com because Matt has the entire document and everything laid out. But yeah, so this is for Martinique. This is the AOC. Just some of the general principles. Harvest season is specified. The cane varieties have to come from 34 defined plots of land. I believe it used to be 27, but it was the AOC was modified in 2014, which expanded and loosened some restrictions. You can't use any pesticides, but you can use a reasonable amount of herbicide, just so the whole harvest is not diminished. But there is a little bit of a push right now for organic agricoles, like what I'm drinking now with this Nissan. But the problem is, you know, the yield is much smaller and the cost is much higher. But yeah, so the cane, the day that it's cut, you have to crush it to extract the juice. You can ferment up to 120 hours. I think it used to be 72. But so that gives a little bit more potential character and a longer fermentation than it used to be. The specific type of still that Matt was mentioning before, the Creole column, which is like what they use in like brandy production and Armagnac and stuff like that.
It's basically like the analyzer and the rectifier columns stacked on top of each other.
So it's not like a multi-column industrial still at all. You can only distill to a certain proof, 65 to 75%, which is actually really relatively low in the world of spirits in general. I think most rum producers go up to 85%, maybe more. Vodka goes up to what, 95%, and just, you know, because they're trying to take out all the flavor. Keeping it lower maintains a lot of the characteristic. Has to be bottled no less than 40%, which I believe all rum in the world has to be at least that. But yeah, it goes on and on, all these different designations. The one that kind of throws me off is that 2% color additives that is now allowed. Matt, do you have any insight into why they would allow that?
I mean, there's been some debate about what that means and what it entails, but essentially they're allowing, you know, caramel coloring, and anything you add to that's not ethanol and water that has a different density is going to create some they call obscuration. Like you said, I've spoken to several different people about it in different domains, and there's not a whole lot of agreement about precisely what it means. So I don't know. Ania might be able to clarify beyond that.
Unmute.
I know I caught myself too. I don't know much about that, to be honest. I know, I mean, you covered it pretty well. I know it's allowed, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think they said something like including caramel, and it's the question of is it E150, which is very bitter and has basically no sugar, or do they allow more, certain caramel, which is sweeter? They said I've spoken to experts, several different experts who don't agree. So I myself don't claim to speak on anything authoritative on this regard. One interesting thing they don't see on this list, which I think is actually very important, is that there are specific required volatile levels are required. Basically, like you have to have at least, I think for unaged it's 225, and for aged it's 325. You have to have at least 325 grams per hectoliter of volatile components, basically flavor components. So they're basically guaranteeing that this has some fairly, strong flavor to it. And my understanding is that was introduced back around 1921 or 22, when they were basically trying to ensure it was flavorful, and that producers weren't basically making vodka and diluting it to strength and calling it rum agricole. So it's their assurance that it will be flavorful, because you have to have these particular volatile components in it. And I don't know if you're going to get into it later, but another interesting thing as well that surprised me, I just learned this 2 years ago, is there's actually a tasting panel. So basically the rums, basically every rum that wants to use that label has to basically go through a tasting panel, and it's a blind tasting panel, and it's basically comprised of like the blenders from the different brands, but they don't know what they're drinking. So like I know, for example, Rhum from JM is on a tasting panel, and they basically, the tasting panel is there to judge, like, is this indicative of rum agricole, or is it too wild for us to call this rum agricole? So it's not a technical requirement, but it's a sensory requirement. So
Getting back into the volatile compounds, is there restrictions on what type of yeast or anything that can be used? Like, is it typically going to be a wild fermentation, or is that distillery by distillery choice, or how does that work?
Ania?
I can speak for JM only in this case, and we do open tank fermentation, but we use Belgium's Baker's yeast as well. So it's not 100% wild-based fermentation. So our fermentation lasts about 24 hours, so sometimes 36, but that's the average.
Yeah. There are specific species. I think it's like Saccharomyces cerevisiae, I think, and then I think there's a second one, but could be wrong on that. But basically, they limit. You can't do crazy like Bombay yeast, for example.
Yeah, correct. And it's a discontinuous fermentation. So when we're not allowed to add anything to the fermentation tank, so to speed it up.
Batch fermentation.
What's that?
It's like batch fermentation versus
yes,
continuous. So yeah.
Discontinuous. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Are we aware of distilleries that are doing a full 120 hours that they're allowed now?
I am not. Matt, are you aware of any?
I know it. I think I don't know specifically anybody who does that. I think it's my guess is that somebody who wanted to do a particularly flavorful rum, or maybe to use more wild yeast than normal. I think there's probably some experimentation, and they said like in order for us to use this variety of yeast or this natural yeast, we need to let it go more than 3 days. I don't think it was an accidental they increased it, but no, I can't tell you anybody who specifically uses it. And even if they do use it, it may not be their standard process. They make, it's also possible they make different marks. Like, the mainline rum is maybe a 24 to 36 hour ferment. Maybe every once in a while they make an unusual batch and they let it go for 5 days. So yeah, that's the best answer I can give you.
And are we aware of any brands in Martinique that are not abiding by these regulations? Because obviously you can do whatever you want, you just can't put the AOC seal on it. So are there brands that are just doing their own thing in Martinique?
There is a distillery around the corner from Clermont, and they do pot distillation, and they don't have AOC agricole stamp on the bottle. I always forget their name, so Matt might be able to help me out with it.
They have another name, but we know the brand is A1710.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, there's a lot of brands. Like I know some of the cask finishes, the various cask finishes, are, you know, if you do like a port cask finish, it's going to not meet the tasting panel. You know, tasting panel is going to reject it, and so it just won't have the AOC label. I could be wrong, but I think both Rhum JM have done, you know, non-AOC labeled rums. Nothing wrong with them whatsoever.
We have what we have here in the US is just a drop in a bucket of what variety they have on the islands and export it outside of the island to European Union. But if you go to a store in Martinique, there are aisles and aisles of different offerings of rums, and most of them probably don't have AOC rum agricole in a bottle. We do finishes with JM in French oak that don't have AOC label because, I mean, for multiple reasons, but one of them is just the production of that expression is so small, it's just not worth it to go through the approval process. So
yeah, like you said, so the AOC sort of guarantees you a particular level of quality, but it shouldn't be seen as not meeting the AOC doesn't mean you're not quality. You're not a good rum. It just means you're not within the particular, very tightly restrained parameters they define for AOC rum.
Exactly, and the AOC document is a living document. It can change. It has changed. There are many more cane varietals that have been approved recently that were before, and I can actually see maybe in years to come that pod distillation possibly will be AOC process as well. I don't know, but it's not set in stone. That's what we need to remember.
Well, thank you guys, appreciate it. So let's move on from rum agricole and talk about rum industriel, also known as rum traditionnel. So this was the original way rum was made in the French islands with molasses base. Production of this continually reduced in scale through the from the late 19th century through the 20th as agricole became the preference. I think there's only one distillery on Martinique, Le Galion, that does molasses-based rum. Am I correct there?
Yeah.
Le Galion does it. I know it's interesting. There are some other. I know definitely on Guadeloupe there are some molasses distilleries that don't really appear on people's radar. I would have to double check. I would normally say no, it's just Le Galion, but there could be at least one more, but I won't name any names or assert that it's true. I'd have to look at my notes.
Okay.
There's some almost like dark matter distilleries on Martinique and Guadeloupe that people have never heard of, but they're making rum. So.
Yeah, I think I have an independent bottling of a Bellevue that I believe is a molasses base, but that's on Guadeloupe, so I'm not sure that.
Yeah.
How many Guadeloupe?
I've studied this a whole bunch, and I have essentially if you read enough French to go find the quotas that are around the rum production in Martinique and Guadeloupe and all the French charts, and look at the quotas, and they're basically a great source of all of that. The quotas are per cane juice per molasses, and it's a great source of basically who's doing what. So.
Mm-hmm. So I understand correctly, the Grand de Rhum, is that a designation within rum industriel? Like, is that what has its own GI, or does rum industriel have a GI?
So the GI is actually for Le Galion, like rums of Le Galion, and there are, if I remember correctly, there's 3 different styles they make, in one of them being Grand de Rhum.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's what I
I could
wanted
try.
to have clarification on.
I'd have to go read my own damn article. So
But yeah, so the Grand Arome, I don't know, is that what you said? Grand Arome?
how I say it, you can probably tell me better. Probably say better.
But it's produced similar to Jamaican rum. It's got high esters, which I imagine is gained through long fermentation time. And they're actually done on column stills, not pot stills, though. So yeah, they're very aromatic. The Grand Arome that we're experiencing tonight, if any of you got samples, to me has a nose very similar to like a DOK or even like a Savannah HERR. But again, those ones were done on pot stills, and this is a column still. But yeah, the Grand Arome is typically sold in bulk. It was used in fragrances, extracts, flavorings, and some independent bottlings use small portions of it.
Like it's almost like a cooking rum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it has a wonderful nose. I don't know if the people who have it have opened that one yet, but I was kind of hoping to save that one after you've experienced all the agricoles, just for the chalk value of it, because it's so different. But yeah, I mean, it's not meant for consumption really on its own, kind of like DOK. It's just so aromatic. But usually it's used in small portions in blends. But the people at Find Rams, the aficionados at Find Rams did this bottling, which everybody who got a sample of this, thank Johnny in North Carolina, because he sent this to me and he allowed me to share it with everybody. And he's not charging anyone. This was just his gift to the club. So it's a really special bottle.
I have one from Europe as well, just like I can say on here.
What's the proof on that one?
Although this one is
For the ABV?
yeah. No, this one is 60%. So yeah.
Okay, this one's 58.32. The ester levels 481. The total volatiles are at 1342.
Yeah, which is like that's like a mid-range. That's actually like a light continental. That's not even full on Jamaican there.
Right. Yeah, I'm surprised how pungent it is for being, I mean, not that 481 is low esters, but for being under 500, it seems way higher.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's sort of like the ester levels and volatile levels. There's like a point of like diminishing returns where it just gets weirder, but it doesn't necessarily get stronger. It just like becomes like, okay,
So I didn't have a lot of imagery to put with Rhum industriel, so I'm throwing this Mai Tai stuff up here. This is something we could really nerd out on if we wanted to. We got into this a little bit last week when we did our cocktail of the month on the Mai Tai. So just in short, when Trader Vic in 44 made his original Mai Tai, he used the Ray and Nephew, or the J Ray 17-year-old, which was laid in cask in 1927. We obviously don't know.
27 or earlier. It could have been slightly
earlier. True.
Yeah.
That's the minimum age on it, so it could have been even older than that.
Yeah.
We don't know the flavor profile. We don't know what the fermentation was. If it was super funky, it likely wasn't. It probably wasn't an ester bomb like Hamden.
We do know it was pot still.
We do know it was pot still, 100%, without a doubt. We know it's pot still. We don't know what kind of barrel it was in. I mean, that's during Prohibition.
Probably a puncheon. Probably a puncheon. We have the article I posted about it shows there is from 1925 and shows the Lindo Brothers warehouse, which would have been J. Ray, and the barrels that we see there are seem to be puncheons. The size seems to match a puncheon, so probably not ex-bourbon.
Right. Well, that was what I was getting at. During when that was laid in cask, so it's very unlikely that it was ex-bourbon. And do we even know when ex-bourbon kind of became the norm of rum?
If you think about it, as I understand it, and I'm sure a bourbon geek could probably correct me somewhat, is that the U.S. Congress decreed that to be bourbon, it must be used in virgin oak barrels. So basically, you cannot reuse them again. So once that law comes into effect, it's like, well, you can't reuse this bourbon, these barrels. If you want to call it bourbon, well, then suddenly I imagine bourbon makers are selling them as soon as they're done with them. So I would imagine there was a big influx around the 60s, probably when it started to spike up.
Right. Yeah. Good point.
You know, I haven't researched it extensively, but that's the most logical explanation I'm aware of.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So yeah, so why are we talking about the Mai Tai when we're talking about Rhum industriel? When you know, Vic sold through his supply of J-Ray 17, he started using the 15. Was going, you know, when that was about out, he started blending it with other things. Eventually, he in the 50s, when the J-Ray 15 was used up, he had to come up with a blend that would somewhat mimic or at least make his Mai Tais still delicious. So it became known that he was using a split of Jamaican and Martinique rum. You know, during the tiki revival of the last 20 years, we all just assumed it was rum agricole because that's pretty much all we have access to. But Martin Kate and maybe some others have done some research, and they think that, you know, in the 50s and 60s, rum agricole was not the norm. So if he was using a Martinique rum, it was probably a rum industriel, right. Which logically makes sense because it has a profile similar to a Jamaican rum. So if he's trying to mimic,
I'll jump in really quick and add, like you said, there's this notion of like Martinique agricole and, you know, the rum made of Martinique and like cane juice, like, oh, it must have been this way for hundreds of years. The reality is what I've seen, and I have like statistics from like I think the 1910s and 20s, 30s, basically the breakdown of agricole cane juice rum versus molasses rum, and molasses rum dominated for a very long time, to the point. One of my favorite sort of historical surprises is that during World War II, the British Navy couldn't buy enough rum for the daily ration, and you know, when they basically had tapped out their own colonies, they bought rum from Martinique, and it's highly unlikely they were buying cane juice rum from Martinique because they were very particular about the flavor profile. So, like I said, all the statistics I've seen indicate that agricole did not, cane juice rum from Martinique did not actually become dominant until the 50s or 60s, sometime around that period of time.
Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah, I mean, we can get into debates about this all day long about what it was. I mean, nonetheless, agricole rum mixed with an aged Jamaican is delicious in a Mai Tai. But what Martin did is he helped come up with the recipe for the Denizens Merchant Reserve, which is intended to be a 1-pour rum for the Mai Tai. It has a 80% Jamaican rum in it, which I believe is all Worthy Park, and the other 20% component is rum industriel.
I think there are some lesser amounts of some of the other ones, but it's possible they changed the blend. So
I based on what you had put on your website a while back, I got into a debate on Rum Reddit with somebody about it. Yeah. They were disputing what you said. I'm like, I'm just reporting what you reported, which came from the mouth of the guy that made the blend. So
well, I told, so what I wrote was what the owner of Denizen, Nicholas Pellis, that's what he told me, right. And it seems to hold up because Shear, from what I understand, Shear does not habitually just put all one distillery in the blend. They have intermediate blends. They're not holding on to specific tanks of this is Worthy Park rum, this is Hampton rum. They have intermediate blends. So it's possible they changed the blend. We don't know, but
right. And with the 20% component of the Grander Rhum that's in that blend, it's not necessarily this 481 ester because I mean they do have an 8-year age statement, so presumably everything in that bottle has aged 8 years, and we don't know what the mark of the rum in it is. So I don't get a lot of this flavor in the Merchant's Reserve, but yeah, just to just to show the other side of the spectrum here of rum agricole, this does exist. It's very small market now. You really can't even get it in the U.S. except in blends like in Denizen's Merchant Reserve. But yeah, it's a shame because it's a really unique product that I wish we had distribution of.
Talk to Eric K.
All right, so these figures and this map could be completely outdated. Ania, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's 9 operating distilleries on Martinique, but within that there's at least a dozen different brands. Can you attest to what exists right now?
Yeah, it looks pretty accurate. Some distilleries make multiple brands. So Trois-Rivières, La Monie are made on the same distillery. JM only makes JM. Nissan only makes Nissan. Clermont, which is distilled at Simon Distillery. Simon Distillery makes another brand called HAC, which is not in the US yet.
And so, yeah, as far as I know, there's also 6 distilleries on Guadeloupe and 3 on Marie-Galante. And everyone who was able to get samples or had things on hand, we're going to try rums from each one of those islands. So let's get to it. So somebody, Ania, how do you say this first one?
Damoiseau.
Damoiseau. Okay.
Damoiseau, yeah, which also used to be in our portfolio up until a couple of years ago.
So yeah, this is no longer available, I think, even in the United States at all for a couple of years now.
As far as I know, they were thinking about doing distribution, but something fell through, I guess. So we were under contract with them for up until a couple of years ago, and we decided not to renew. So we now only have Rhum JM and Clermont in our portfolio.
Gotcha. So is there any other rums from Guadeloupe that are available in the United States that aren't independent bottlers?
Not that I know of.
Can I ask a question about that? So
Yeah.
like Transcontinental just did like a molasses Guadeloupe release. Is that considered like a rum traditionnel, or is that something different?
Rum categorization is a very complicated subject. I saw somebody ask a question in the chat about rums made at agricole distilleries but not abiding by agricole rules. Like, is it still called a rum agricole, or what is it called? I think it's just called rum with an H, and they don't necessarily attach agricole to even every agricole bottle when they speak of rum. I'm not sure. I wouldn't attempt to categorize that on my own.
I mean, I'll just say that you know, I agree with Ania. It's not, there are different terms used for molasses rum, and I've even seen one basically like it's almost like a factory rum or like sugar factory rum. I forget the exact. It's sort of like the same word as candy, basically. But yeah, like Guadeloupe has a substantial amount of rum made from molasses. In fact, if I remember correctly, the majority of rum made on Guadeloupe is made from molasses. And the biggest distillery there is Damoiseau, and we know they make both molasses and cane juice rum. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. You've got this distillery, you've got all this equipment, and you actually have a fairly constrained cane harvest season. So, and you basically have to distill it as soon as you cut the cane. So what are you going to do? Are you going to let that equipment sit around unused for 7 months of the year? So it's not terribly surprising that there's a lot of molasses rum coming out of Guadeloupe.
So, any of you that are trying this Damoiseau right now, what are your thoughts on it?
Very fruity. It's like strawberries and bananas.
I'm really surprised that the nose on it is very reminiscent of my Clarin that I had a couple of weeks ago, but the actual taste is nothing at all like it. Very interesting.
That's always been my favorite expression from Damoiseau that we had here in the US. And I always called it a hippie sister to Rhum JM when I described it to people.
Floral crown in its hair.
Yeah.
Mhm. I can see that.
I get a lot of bitterness that I'm not used to with an agricole rum. You know, because I usually get a lot of like floral and fruitiness, but getting a bitterness. It's not offensive in any way. It's just different.
An interesting thing about Guadeloupe agricole is that they can go to 85% versus 75 on Martinique.
You will also see, even here on the picture, you will see a little bit of color on this rum. And that's because they're rested in wooden vats as opposed to stainless steel. So stainless steel is required by AOC rules. So they have a little bit more freedom of what they can do. And one of those things is resting their rum in wooden vats.
So could they? I mean, I guess they're calling it a blanc. They're not calling it necessarily unaged, because even though it's just a vat, but it is touching wood. So would that not be considered aging of some kind?
So per agricole rules, and again, Guadeloupe doesn't have AOC rules in place. They have more of a GI. They cannot put aged rum on the bottle unless it's 3 years or older. That's why if we look at a JM portfolio, we have GM Gold, which is only 1 year old rum, right? We don't necessarily put year one on the bottle. I imagine it's the same reason here. Don't remember the exact, I think it's 15 months that they're rested in wooden vats, so it's under 3 years.
Do we know the size of those vats?
I am terrible with numbers. I have it written down somewhere, but I cannot tell you. They're big.
Many gallons.
Yeah. They giant. They, you know, imagine stainless steel tank, so it's about the same size, but made out of wood.
All right, I'm moving on to the Rhum JM now. The same ABV. This one to me is a lot brighter. Get a lot of like olive juice. Nice floral characteristic, fruity.
I think that's what I liked about the Damoiseau is that it, like, I find that olivey note really tough. And I've always had trouble with agricole because of it. And that one didn't really taste that. So it's a shame it's not available here.
Don't buy any clearance if you don't like the olive note.
I ain't right about that.
So real quick, I just want to jump in and say I just looked up the Guadeloupe GI, and it's interesting. It says rums intended for the production of blanc rum are matured in vats for a minimum period of 3 weeks between distilling and conditioning, and doesn't specify oak versus steel, for example. Whereas it does say rum intended for the production of brown rum are aged in an oak container for a minimum period of 6 months. So it feels like they left some ambiguity as to whether they're doing, whether you can presumably use stainless steel or a wooden vat. So
I remember, Matt, like being at the distillery and talking to the Damoiseau brother that it was their choice to use wooden vat for this particular expression. We did have another expression from Damoiseau was just 80 proof, and they used stainless steel for that one. So that's just 110 as far as I know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys have fallen in love with either of these thus far, obviously we know we can't get the Damoiseau here. The Rhum JM 55, Ania, we got to do something about getting this into more stores in Austin, because it seems like it's either reserved for like commercial bar use or what, because it's just, I was very lucky to find the one single bottle left in Austin at Wine Merchant last month.
Passionspirits.com. That's where I got mine.
So
and,
you can get
a control state, no less.
Spirits, which does not help us in Texas to get stuff on the shelves. I know we don't have tons of time, but my job is essentially putting liquid to the lips in Texas and beyond. And distribution in chain states like Texas is extremely challenging. Just to sum it up for you guys, to get in stores like Twin Specs, you have to pay for it. And you can imagine companies like ours, which have a minimal or sometimes no marketing budget at all, cannot afford to pay in to be on the shelves at 50 Twin stores. And, you know, going into presentations with the buyer and presenting certain things to them from the time of the presentation to the time I might make it to the shelves takes about at least 6 months. So that's why, you know, chains are usually so behind on trends as opposed to places like Austin Shaker, where I can go and meet with Kiki and Dave and they put it on the shelf the next day. In addition, you know, those guys who make the decisions in chains, they don't necessarily try to follow trends. So, and they don't necessarily interested in what we interested in. So the answer that I always get is that rum doesn't sell. And I'm not about to go and tell them, well, you don't have the right stuff on the shelves. You know, I want them to see me, you know, over and over again. So it's a very challenging process. So that's why things like GM 110 is probably in a lot of stores for a really long time. But what helps, and I'm glad I have your attention here, is you go into a store and asking for it. That helps, you know, even at Twin Specs, where they do pay attention to what people ask for. And if they bring a bottle or two for you, which they usually will if you ask and pay for it, and they can request it from the distributor, it helps me going into that presentation and telling that buyer, it's like, hey, people are asking for it. You might want to consider it on the shelf at 25 stores. So that's a challenge in a nutshell, if it makes any sense.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah.
And just for clarification on my tasting notes, I grabbed the wrong glass. So whatever I just said for the tasting notes on Rhum JM was actually Pere Labat. So let's reverse those, because I didn't have my bottles lined up in the same order as I'm looking at on the screen. So that oliveness, I'm not getting on the Rhum JM, at least not to that same extent. So let's move on to the Pere Labat, everybody else, and I'll move on to Rhum JM.
Pere Labat is definitely much more olivey. Like you were right on that, but wrong on the bottle.
Yeah, so this Pere Labat from Marie-Galante, one of the guys from, hopefully all of you have checked out the Rumcast podcast at some point. They're putting out really good content regularly. And I've done trades with both of those guys that do the podcast. And one of them, just as a bonus, threw in a sample of this Pere Labat. And I tasted it and I was like, okay, how the hell do I get this? And there was a place in Florida that would ship to Texas. Hit me up offline and I'll tell you how to make it happen. But I bought 3 bottles because I was enamored with that 1 ounce sample of it. And so Pere Labat does have distribution in Texas, but not for this expression. Only they're 40% and they're aged, which I think is like 8 years or something. I imagine the 59 is a wholly different beast than either of those. And it's to me one of my favorite agricoles I've ever tried. So hopefully we can get this expression here in Austin. But like I said, like all 3 of these we're tasting tonight are not readily available to us here, which is a shame because these are all wonderful in their own regards.
Mike, if you like this, I really think you'd like that Sharonda.
I think I have a sample of that.
It's not the blue one. It's not the traditional one. Just make sure it's the 100% cane juice one.
Okay.
Hey Kim, what are the differences you've found between those two? I've never had the one that you have, but I see it all the time.
I've actually never had the other one, but the difference is the blue bottle, kind of the more standard one on the market, I think is a combination of cane juice and pot still molasses, if I'm correct.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And this one is pure cane juice.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure how you guys are feeling as far as like the heat on these, but you know, for being 55 to 59%, I don't get a lot of heat. Like that, the Pere Labat 59, that was the one that, you know, when I was putting this all together, I was like, well, that needs to be in the mix. And, you know, there's plenty of Martinique rums to choose from, but most of them available to us are 50% or below. That's why I went, you know, through such a struggle to find this 55. And obviously the Damoiseau is 55 is the only option I think we even had here. So I wanted to get them within a comparable range of ABV. But I don't find them to be hot at all. Like, you know, going from the Pere Labat 59 to the Rhum JM, I mean, the JM tastes like water to me. And the Pere Labat, the Labat drinks at like 50 or below to me. Are you guys feeling similar on that?
I think you're a little more practiced than me.
I found it weird because the Pere Labat to me was, yeah, it didn't taste very hot, but for me, the Damoiseau or whatnot was, I don't know if it's just because I started with that maybe, but it tasted really, really intense and just very different.
And I felt the same, but I also started with it too, so.
I have a St. James Brut cologne, which is, I don't know if it's available here, but it's 74.1% ABV. And you think it would set your mouth on fire, but it is just, it's beautiful. It's just like, this is the rum agricole I've been waiting my life for.
So is cologne an age designation? Because I have a Clement that's something cologne.
I don't think so. I think it just means column. I could be wrong.
Oh, okay.
Ania,
That makes sense.
You could probably tell us.
Clement Cologne is made at the with the old Creole column still. That's 100% copper. So AOC requires 1/3 of the column to be copper, and other Clement expressions are made at the newer columns, which is 1/3 copper. Cologne expression is made at 100% copper column.
Yeah.
Oh. Thank you.
It's not available in the US.
Yeah, actually, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if you can see it there, but on the look right there, it says Cologne Creole. So it seems to imply it's column.
Yes, here you go.
Trying to find mine because I thought I had the one that I got in the US. But maybe it's something different. Yeah, the Cologne Creole. So this is the one you're saying is not in the US?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I got mine from Martinique as well.
Maybe it was in California at some point, but I definitely know it's not in Texas.
You know what? I might have gotten this when I did a fine drams order at one point.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's probably what it was.
So California's got much lax spirit laws. So all the they can actually get this stuff directly without the distributor in the middle, and all their passion spirit sales go through California, which is why I mentioned it really doesn't help us in Texas to, I mean, please order, but it doesn't help us to put things on the shelves in Texas. So, fun fact.
What else makes it difficult to, I mean, it seems like a lot of, particularly the contrast between Texas and California is infuriating, but it seems like a lot of great rums are just like, yeah, Texas is too much of a pain in the ass. Is it purely the state level policies or combination there?
I mean, liquor laws, as I said, and they're much lax in California. I don't know the intricacies, but I know, you know, online sales are possible in California where they are not possible here. Shipment of spirits is possible and legal there, which is not here. So lots of things, you know, direct shipment from our warehouse in New Jersey to California is possible, where here we have to go through a distributor. Lots of things, you know, but as far as my portfolio goes, everything that's available in California now is available here. Not necessarily on retail shelves, but one thing I'm going to reiterate is if you see something in the bar here, you can request that bottle in a retail shop. Go to your favorite retailer, go to Specs, go to Twin, and ask them like, hey, order this bottle for me. I really would like to buy it.
I mean, as I understand it, basically bars and shops both have to order through their distributor.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
correct.
So yeah, so if a distributor has it, if their distributor has it and can sell it to a bar, they, in theory, can sell it to a shop as well.
Well, to correct you, Matt, here you cannot buy directly from a distributor. If you buy a restaurant, you have to buy through retail. That's another step.
Is that the fourth tier I've heard about?
Oh God, I don't know. I got lost in all the tiers, but I know it. Yeah, in other states like Louisiana, you can buy, bars and restaurants can buy directly from a distributor. Here, you cannot.
Okay.
But if you see a bottle in a bar, again, it is in distribution. It's not necessarily in retail shelf. Just ask. It helps a lot.
Yeah, I think maybe it applies more to like whiskey and stuff, but like, you know, things like blends and things that are allocated. Like restaurants and bars can always get those things, but you know, there's just not enough of it beyond restaurant. So, you know, the supply there to get it to consumers. But I imagine the market on the rum is not nearly that high. So, you know, if it's available at a bar, but then again, like how many bars do we have in Austin that have an outstanding rum selection of things that we haven't seen, you know, in the liquor store? But yeah, like Ania says, I mean, always ask, because if you've seen it at a bar, we can definitely try to get it at a store, and you know, preferably at a place like Austin Shaker rather than Specs or a chain.
Here.
So what's everybody's favorite of these rum agricoles?
Might be the Damoiseau.
Yeah, me too. And I was actually looking, they have, I mean, once in a while, if I really love something, I'll order it from Europe. They have the 50 at like fine drams, which unlike Whiskey Exchange is in like $75 to have delivered here. Does anybody know if like the 50 is close to the 55 in taste?
Don't know.
Can't speak
Haven't
to that,
tried it,
Kim, but I did find the Damoiseau 55 on another website called winetoship.com.
I Googled that and it's gotten some shady reviews, but I'll have to look more into that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hopefully it arrives at my house because I ordered a bottle.
keep us posted.
Will do.
to me,
I'll keep you guys posted on the 50 if I order it.
Yeah, definitely do. To me, I don't know. I think the Rhum JM is to me the most classic. Like that is what rum agricole should be. I don't know. It's the classic flavor of rum agricole for me. But the Pere Labat is just so unique and interesting. It does remind me more of a Clarin than an agricole, because it does have that brininess to it. I don't know. The Damoiseau is actually my least favorite of the bunch.
Yeah, I think we all agree. I think I'm in agreement with you. I can't speak for everyone on here. That JM is definitely the classic agricole, but after, you know, I think everyone here has had at least 40 agricoles, if not more, that after a while we're like, what's slightly different about this? Like, you know, I'm leaning towards the Damoiseau because it is so unlike the JM, which is classic, but I'd like a little bit of a twist, and I got to see the expressions of it. So I'm with you, but I think in this group we might lean away from classics because we try so much.
Yeah, I totally see that.
I'll throw a vote in for the Pere Labat as the favorite too. It's got a little bit more like super ripe banana fruit fly attraction going on than the Damoiseau, but yeah, it's good and tasty. Again, there's no bad options, but yeah.
Let's
Funny.
Yeah, let's hear a couple more views, and then I want to get through the chat questions before we get into the Grand Arome, just in case we missed anything. But if anyone else has an opinion, please share it. Or not.
Double
Yeah,
check
I'd probably rank mine the JM 55, then the Damoiseau, then the Labat. And the Damoiseau, that was from a bottle that I owned actually, and I just never made anything with it. I'm not a huge tea punch fan, but I remember seeing it. There was some online competition, and they were saying that was the best one for a tea punch, and so I picked it up and made a few of those, and didn't really revisit it until recently. So, yeah. But the JM 55 I definitely like.
So yeah, let's all put thanks to Jason as well, because Johnny supplied the Le Galion. Jason was the only person that I knew that had the Damoiseau in Austin, and thankfully he had enough to go around and share with everybody. So thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, no problem. Mm-hmm.
Here.
Jason, have you had a tea punch with aged agricole?
So the first drink I made tonight, I used aged Clement. It wasn't VSOP. It was one of the, I think, a 10-year or something.
Okay.
And I didn't care for it too much, and so I then used another JM that I have, just the white. I think it's the 50, and I liked it much better. So I don't think I like the aged agricoles in a tea punch.
Yeah. Try a Sazerac with Clement, aged Clement, really good.
Ooh. That I would do.
Okay. As soon as the session's over.
Yes.
we call them Rumseracs.
Rumseracs. I love it.
Sounds great. Cool. So let's scroll through the chat real quick. Is there anything in here that anybody asked that we didn't get to? Kim, we answered you. The three-roll distillery, I believe, is the same distillery that was called Caneland. They changed their name for some reason.
Yeah, I think you are right. They changed their name recently. I was there, so they're cachaça. I did a tour of the distillery. It's basically they use cachaça yeast. That's why they call it a cachaça. But yeah, it's very loose on regulation.
Right. So just the fact that they have products called cachaça and agricole coming out of Louisiana is very suspect.
Yeah, and in theory, that is now a protected term in the United States.
Yes, it is.
We recognize Brazilian cachaça regulations.
Yeah, I was wondering what they thought of that.
They might be too small to be recognized, but I'm sure they might get a cease and desist soon.
Somebody has to complain, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it was 2013 that Brazil got their designation that cachaça is a distinct product of Brazil. The kind of regulation that we need for agricole in the United States, cachaça actually got in 2013.
Yeah, we're at the mercy of the TTB label holders who do not seem to understand the rules themselves. So.
Yeah. All right, so Mr. C asked for clarification, is Martinique cane juice rum without the AOC mark still called agricole or just non-AOC agricole? Ania or Matt?
I don't have the very specific answer for that, but I think it's just called rum with an H because that's how French spell rum.
I mean, in general, you can call it whatever the hell you want. You just can't call it the words that are protected by the regulation.
Yeah.
So you'll sometimes see like Rhum de les Antilles, for example. They'll make up creative words that sound close, but it's really just that particular expression or sequence of wording is what's protected. Anything that's not that is kind of fair game.
But would they be prevented from using the actual word agricole at all?
I don't think so, because I mean, as I understand it, and again, Ania knows more than I do here, isn't agricole just agricultural?
100%. That's why I kind of have a pet peeve of Louisiana agricoles using a French word on their bottle. Because we're not in France here.
Louisiana loves to use French words anywhere they can.
That's true. But you know, going back to our conversation, is they taken advantage of the terms with which come certain expectations, and they don't necessarily meet those expectations. And I just hate for somebody trying agricole for the first time that's not from Martinique and thinking that's their representation of the quality and the rum that comes out of Martinique. Because they are not the same.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, it's like California champagne.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up too.
Yeah, same idea. Go for it.
Yeah, no, that's what I was gonna say. You know, California champagne. Is it?
Yeah, and if I understand it correctly, the regulation basically there was a battle in terms of the allowed usage, and it was essentially okay. California can still use champagne if you were using it before we reached this agreement.
Okay.
Welcome to my life of esoteric.
Damn.
Weird.
Yeah, that's like unusual.
Yeah. Grandfathered in.
Yeah, exactly.
Robert had asked Rumcast podcast. Yeah, that's the name, the Rumcast. Everyone check it out. You know, they've interviewed Christelle from Hamden, who is going to be a guest here soon. Zan, did they do Zan? Zan's going to be a guest here soon from Worthy Park. I think they interviewed him. You know, they're getting, you know, they talked to Richard Seal, Maggie, just, you know, people in the industry that have a lot of insight, and they're asking the right questions. It's a really worthwhile podcast. They're coming out fairly regularly. I highly recommend it. Rumcast, check it out. They're good dudes. I've traded with both of them.
With Will Hokinga, right?
What's that, Matt?
So this Will Hokinga, remember correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And John Gulla.
Okay. Yeah, I know Will well because we do the Zabby. We have done and will continue to do more Zabby sessions. So yeah.
Talk about Zavvy because I need to be like a Patreon Zavvy person because there's a lot of good content that I'm never available to catch live.
Right. Yeah. I think it's like $5 a year or something like that.
Really?
So it's inexpensive enough for each spread. Like is it but they've been good. Is it all the worst sessions where we've done with producers? They basically they give us the video file and then we repost it on Facebook. So any of the ones I've done with Zabby, you can also just go watch on YouTube. So
yeah, it seems like some of the YouTube versions are abbreviated. But yeah, I mean, I'd easily pay $5 a month or more just for the content.
Yeah.
It's great stuff. If you go to the Austin Rum Society website, there is a resources page. It has links to Matt's website. It has links to the Rumcast. It has links to Zavvy and others. Just stuff I like to read and nerd out on or listen to. And I just added some liquor stores. Thus far, it's only just the 3 Austin Shaker locations. And there's a place on Anderson, if anyone is north and doesn't want to drive south, Austin Shaker. AB Liquors on West Anderson. They're doing a really good job of getting good rums in their store. They listen to suggestions. You know, they have all the Clarins. They have some of the transcontinental rum lines. They just got in Privateers. You know, they're listening to suggestions. I highly recommend checking them out.
You say
also Avery Ranch Liquor is a good one. They just upgraded their rum selection. So if you guys live way up north, I recommend Ron is actually the name of the buyer there. How interesting. So
what's the name of that one? Avery what?
Avery Ranch Liquor.
Avery Ranch.
Avery Ranch.
Beverage World is a good one. Eric Pellegrin is actually French, so you'll find a good agricole selection at that store. A lot like support small guys and ask for your favorite bottles. They will be happy to help you out.
All right, I'm going to stop the share so I can look at everybody. Hey everyone. Yeah, so let's. If anyone needs to go, you're more than welcome to split. I'm going to pour myself some of this Grand Rhum and enjoy it because this stuff is
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I just want to say thank you to Mike because this was so educational. I thought I hated agricoles, and then like getting to taste this spectrum, I've learned I don't, and that's really exciting. But a question, like one of the big brands would be Nissan. Where in the spectrum of kind of like going from the Damoiseau is probably like the least olivey to the JM and then to the Pere Labat? Like, does anybody know where that brand generally falls?
I would put them kind of parallel with JM. Like, to me, that's kind of the classic Martinique agricole rum.
I agree with that. Yeah, they essentially in more or less in the same area of Martinique. And Nice is also one of the oldest distilleries there. It's one of my favorite rums that's not in my portfolio that comes out of Martinique, hands down.
And Nissan is one of the smaller ones as well. They and La Flavorite are like the two sort of very small families of distilleries that make like less than 2% of the overall Martinique production.
What about Clement? Do they fall relatively close to that same area? I only know their VSOP with any familiarity.
Clement is distilled in a southeast part of the island, so this way you can totally nerd out on the terroir between GM and Clement. To me, the flavor profile is a little bit more citrusy, sharper. It's more coastal, so like you get a little bit more salinity in it. But yeah, and also I would call it the very much classic expression of agricole. It's not as rustic as Damoiseau or Pere Labat to me.
And
Is there big-
Go
ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, does Clement have a 50% or higher unaged?
We have Con Bleu, which is a single varietal expression, and it's
Right here.
Yeah, yeah. So
what's the ABV?
What's that?
50%.
Okay, cool. I only knew of the 40%, so cool.
And also, some expressions are just not available in the US. So we trying to grow the category and bring more rum in. But yes, Clement does make higher proof rum, it's just not necessarily here. But what's here is a single blue cane expression. It's also one of my favorites, and it's 100 proof.
It was a great tea punch. That was my first one for the evening. It was quite good.
And if you go to Martinique, go to the I'm forgetting the name of it, the Clement distillery. It's not the actual distillery anymore, but go to Habitation Clement. Go there. It's like a candy land, like the gift shop is a candy land, rums you've never seen before.
So, okay, this Le Galion is fucking bonkers. This stuff
It's so weird. It's so weird. That's why I sent the bottle. I was like, I just want y'all to try this thing because
I dig it.
It's so 100% different than anything else we've tasted tonight.
Thank you for sending it, Johnny. It's very nice.
Yeah.
Wow,
Thank you
I
so
just
much.
had a sip. That is bizarre.
Yeah, I think this comes from the same little. I mean, how big is Martinique? How big of an island is it? Things can be so varied.
Holy cow, that is like salty on the tongue, like almost like puckered.
Yeah, I mean,
My favorite of the night.
that's fermentation at work. That is the critical difference there. It's fermentation. Wild fermentation, long fermentation. That's going to make all the difference in the world.
Do we know how long that fermentation is, or if they're doing any kind of muck or anything?
It's in their GI. So I think it's up 3 weeks or something like that. They do allow pretty long fermentation.
I shared a little quote in the chat about Grand Rhum, and it says it's produced using a mix of vinasse,
which is basically Jamaican dunder.
It's dunder, or what's the difference between that and muck?
Same thing.
I have a whole article on that.
We got into that in the Jamaican Taste of Place.
And I missed that. Vinasse dunder is same thing. Sour mash and whiskey. Just basically what was left in the still after the second run. Basically, what was left in the still is highly acidic, and that acid helps when you use that acidic water for your next fermentation. You basically juice your ester creation.
I will say that this is the most unique agricole I have ever had.
Well, it's not an agricole.
Not an agricole.
It's not an agricole.
Sorry, it's just not, yeah, it's not right.
Yeah.
It's from Martinique, but
That was the whole point of contrast. That Johnny kept saying, he's like, let's add this to the agricole. I'm like, okay, but
I'm like, I had no idea what I was
like,
ordering. I was like, it was from Martinique, and I'm like, okay, you know, I know rum agricole. This, you know, I understand this, and I get this. I'm like, what in the hell is this? Like, it is so. I mean, even beyond the Clarins, I like so like
This is
savory
like gym
and
sauce.
weird. Yeah, it's weird, man. It is weird.
In a
Wild
good way.
yeast.
In a good way.
But the thing, it's also very drinkable. Like when you look at like the Savannah Hair and the DOK, like those ones are so weird and bizarre and novelty to me. Like what I put my DOK in an atomizer bottle and I just spray it on top of my daiquiris just for the essence. But I don't drink it because it's not. It shouldn't be drank. It's ridiculous.
Well,
But
somebody
this is
came up
very
with
drinkable.
a Mai Tai recipe of this, the Grand Rhum, with the New Yarmouth, both of the, you know, things from Fine Drams, and it was like the, you know, crazy nuclear Mai Tai that was a mix of both those, and that was pretty crazy. I made one of those, and I'm like, that's enough. I'm good with one. That's yeah.
Robbie, you mentioned that a couple sessions ago, and I bought off of that reference. I bought both of those bottles.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. I mean, Fine Drams, they seem like good people. Like I bought some cool, like really weird scotch from them that you can't get here. So just, you know, their shipping prices coming from Germany or the Netherlands or wherever it ships from is actually pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I've gotten a few things from there. Reasonable. We should get like a bulk order though.
Yeah.
We definitely should talk about that, putting together a bulk order. Because all shipping from Europe is not what it used to be a year or two ago before COVID. It was very inexpensive to order from Fine Drams, especially if you're buying like 6 bottles. It's not that anymore. Because this is the time of night that we start just going on tangents and babbling. I just want to thank Matt and Ania for joining us tonight and bringing all their expertise. You guys were awesome. I know you probably don't have all night to just chat about this.
I'm taking the night off, so I know Ania would be here, and I wanted to hear her talk. So
thank you guys so much.
Anya, thank you. I know how to make a tea punch.
I'll join anytime I can. Thank you.